who's kicking us off, but happy to hand it over to you all.
Okay, thanks, Chris. This is Mike White from Arizona State University. I'll get us started. I'm the research partner on this SPI. Tempe was a 2017 grantee, and this was their first SPI. This is my third go round as a research partner. I do want to, we have three presenters today. Myself, Carlena Orosco, who is the supervisor of the crime analysis unit at Tempe PD. She's also a doctoral student at ASU. She's going to present, and Commander Sorensen from Tempe PD oversees training. So it'll be the three of us. I do want to give a shout out to Victor Mora, who's here as well, now in a new role with Sandak, but Victor was part of this project as well. So let's get started. Next slide. So just a little bit of an overview of what we're going to present to you the next 20 minutes or so. I'm going to start off and just give you a brief kind of 30,000 foot description of the project. And then we're going to kind of tag team this. There are three main pieces that we're going to talk about. The first is the curriculum development. As you saw from the first slide, we're talking about de-escalation training and the evaluation of it. And so Carlena is going to talk about the process that the team went through to create what is a customized de-escalation training. Commander Sorensen will talk about the training itself, which includes, I think we have a video that we're going to show, and body-worn camera footage was part of the training, using or optimizing the footage. And then I'll talk a bit about the evaluation, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. So next slide. The overview, and this was a pretty straightforward project. It was basically to design, deliver, and evaluate de-escalation training. And the design piece, I think, was a little more complicated than we anticipated. The Tempe PD leadership from the start had decided that they did not want an off-the-shelf canned de-escalation training program. Rather, they wanted to build their own. They wanted to customize one that was well suited for the department, for the officers, for the community. And Carlena is going to talk about the things that the team did over a period of 18 months to design this curriculum. Commander Sorensen will talk about the training. The training was a one day, 10-hour classroom-based training. It did involve some scenarios, and then there were a handful of virtual refresher trainings that occurred in the months after the initial classroom-based training. And the evaluation, it was a randomized controlled trial, randomized by squads. I'll talk a bit about some of the evaluation findings that we have when we get to my portion. I will say, as Chris had stated, there are very few evaluations of police de-escalation training. This is now one of three completed evaluations of de-escalation, and you'll see we have some pretty positive findings in terms of changing both officer behaviors and attitudes. So that's the overview. Next slide, we'll turn to the curriculum development piece, and I'm going to hand it over to Carlena to talk about some of the things that we did to build this training.
Thank you so much, Mike. So as Mike mentioned, I'm going to just briefly discuss the curriculum development process, specifically the data that we collected to inform the various curriculum modules that were included. So the first thing that we did create a de-escalation committee that consisted of ASU researchers, as well as some of our field operations personnel, some leadership. And within that group, we selected a few officers to send to de-escalation trainings. And what we did is we looked beyond policing and criminal justice, and we thought about any possible trainings, whether in education or other areas, that had some type of de-escalation nexus that we wanted to include. So overall, we sent officers to 22 trainings. There were 5 that were online, 4 that were held locally, and 13 that were national. And this included visits to other agencies. And when we thought about other agencies that we wanted officers to visit, we considered those departments that were incorporating or had implemented some type of de-escalation training or were incorporating it into their policy. LAPD is one in particular. And so we sent officers there as well. And once they attended these trainings, we had them complete a training form. And you can see here on the screen, this is just the first page of that training form. We really wanted to know what the training looked like, what was covered in the training. Are there any materials? What was done really well, and what were some areas of opportunity in terms of the training? And gathering all this information, it really helped us to understand where the gaps were in the training that did exist. Next slide, please. So one of the biggest components of this project is the role of the Tempe peer-nominated top de-escalators. And it was really important to us to harness local expertise before developing this curriculum. So what we did is we attended all of the shift briefings in field operations, and we asked officers to nominate 3 of their peers that they felt were exceptional at de-escalation, those who were very skilled at being able to defuse potentially violent encounters in the field. And we have a list of, so many, there was over 100 officers nominated at least once. We then provided that list to the sergeants in field operations, and we asked them to also provide their list of top de-escalators. We used this 2-level vetting process to make sure that we selected top de-escalators based on their skills versus popularity. So from that, we arrived at a list of 14 top de-escalators, and then we spent quite a bit of time with them. So we went on 44 ride-alongs with our top de-escalators, and we observed 166 interactions in the field. This could be calls for service, citizen interacting with officers on a pedestrian stop, for example. Any interaction we observed, we coded it. And we coded 107 variables per citizen interaction. So you can see here on the screen, this is the first page of our extensive coding instrument. We really wanted to capture variables pertaining to the setting, citizen behavior, officer behavior, any other dynamics that would give us any type of knowledge about de-escalation and its application in the field. We also did some one-on-one interviews with our top de-escalators. We wanted to understand their experience, their professional development, and basically how they became such experts at de-escalation. And then finally, we also held some focus groups with our top de-escalators. And in these focus groups, we watched some body-worn camera footage, and we really dissected it. What did the officer do well? What were some areas of opportunity in that incident? And it really helped us to understand the application of de-escalation in the field and what can be done to improve those interactions. Next slide, please. And another large component in terms of data that informed the curriculum was an officer survey that we conducted with field operations. The first survey was conducted in the fall of 2018, and the second was in the summer of 2019. And this was before the delivery of the training. We went to shift briefings and field operations to administer the survey. And the survey really did cover a vast number of topics, including perceptions of de-escalation training. So willingness to participate in de-escalation training and perceptions about the possible impacts of de-escalation training on interactions in the field. We also asked about tactics that are used while interacting with citizens, as well as the frequency of tactics. So yes, these tactics are important, but how often do you use them? And so taken together, we really just combine all of these project elements to shape the customized de-escalation curriculum. And we think it was very robust in terms of all of this different types of data to give us just a very comprehensive understanding of de-escalation in the field. Next slide, please. So now what I'm going to do is pass it over to Commander Dane Sorensen, and he's going to discuss the curriculum content more specifically, as well as the delivery of the training. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlena. All right, so thanks for having me. I'm Dane Sorensen. I'm a commander over our training and hiring unit here at Tempe. But first part of the delivery portion, we wanted to get out to our officers that this de-escalation training that they were going to attend had real value in the day-to-day policing that they do. So we had to come up with a definition. Believe it or not, it was very difficult to come up with this definition. But we start our training out in the morning with the reading of this definition. De-escalation. This is what we came up with. Techniques used to gain compliance with the goal of reducing violence or aggression. Okay, this can be accomplished through the application of patrol model, communication, the use of appropriate force and or other reasonable techniques. But the big, asterisk down at the bottom in bold is officers should not compromise their safety or increase the risk of physical harm to the public when applying these techniques. Next slide, please. So when we were coming up with the actual training, there were basically 4 areas that we wanted to hit on. We want to hit on pre-care, self-management, managing resources, and resiliency. And when we speak about pre-care, things I want to talk about specifically are, how are you showing up for work? What are the things that you're doing in your personal life? What kind of lifestyle are you leading that makes it so you come to work prepared for this job? We all know it's a difficult job. And if you're starting on a stress scale that's high, as you walk through the door, there's likelihood for something not good to happen. The second part was the self-management piece. Are we identifying what our actual skill set is? If you're managing calls for service, your training, things like that, you understand where your weak spots are and where your strengths are. And you also understand the strength and the weak spots of your squad mates and your supervisors. Also, the self-management piece. Are you having a bad day? Know if you're showing up for a bad day. If you have a partner, tell your partner, hey, I'm having a bad day. Maybe you should start these out for me, these contacts as we get going. The third piece was managing resources. Tempe Police Department, we have a lot of different resources. We have a lot of different specialty units, tactical, canine. We have a lot of different technologies. We have drone program. We have camera programs where we can sneak and peek into dangerous situations. We have lots of less lethal tools. We manage currently 4 different less lethal options that are carried on the street by patrol officers. What kind of resources do you have available to you to help mitigate a situation to have a better outcome? And then the last one is resiliency. And we're not just talking resiliency as you go home, but resiliency in this job. Are we debriefing the job or debriefing incidents, both at an operational and an emotional level? So operationally, what did we do well? What could we have done better? How do we learn from this? Is this something that needs to be shared within the in-field operations? Emotionally, is this a call for service, or we need to take a step back with these squads that were involved? Are they needing to get out into some peer support or some critical incident stress management stuff? We have all those programs to get people into. So resiliency is a big deal to make it so you can go call to call to call. And sometimes we even, if you need to take a break from call to call to call and just take a breather after one, we support that. All right, next slide, please. So when we talk about de-escalation, I know we talked about the 4 things we wanted to encompass, but we put them essentially in 3 pillars. The first is the well-being pillar. That's where we talk about our pre-care, our self-management, identifying source and trauma, coping mechanisms, and critical incident stress management. The second pillar is emotional intelligence. We want to make sure that our officers are approaching scenes, going into situations and understanding what they're seeing in front of them. Are they reading the room correctly? Are they reading the people around them correctly? Are they reading the suspect correctly? Are they reading other officers correctly? Do they know what they're walking into? The third pillar is by far, I think, the most important pillar, and that is our operational pillar. And that's where you see on the left-hand side of the screen, the patrol model. It's an acronym, and it's a decision-making it's a decision-making acronym that we use and we expect our officers to use. And I'll go through it real quick. The P stands for plan. As an officer responding for a call for service, you hear the call for service, it's sent to you by dispatch. What's your plan? Every call should have a plan. Every supervisor listening to a call, whether it's something small or something large, should have a plan. The third officer arriving to a hot scene should have a plan that's probably different than the first, second, or 10th officer arriving. The assessment is A. When you arrive on scene is what you're seeing in front of you, what you were sent to. If it's not, what kind of plan are you then making to deal with that? So the one of the examples we use in the actual training is you're sent to a shoplift, but you arrive on scene and the suspect's running out the door with handcuffs on. Obviously, what you were sent to is not what is happening at the Walmart that you were sent to for a shoplift. The time. So when we talk about time for us is distance and cover. And it's not just distance and cover between you and the suspect, distance and cover between the suspect and other people. We have an obligation to the community every time we respond to a call. We have an obligation to the suspect to give them every opportunity to have a successful outcome. But ultimately, a suspect makes that decision, but we have to mitigate what we do with them, and time and distance allows us to make more decisions. But if you have to move quicker because of something else, your decisions get smaller and you got to act quickly. The R is for redeploy. Hey, when I arrived on scene, I may have been in a good place. We empower our officers to not only redeploy themselves, but to redeploy additional assets that are coming on scene, redeploy their supervisors that don't actually know what's going on. First officer on scene is the only person that has true situational awareness as to what's occurring in front of them. Other resources, as I spoke earlier, the O is for other resources. Tempe has a lot of other resources. We have IGAs and agreements with other agencies around us that have air units. We have a lot of different special assignments. We have a lot of less lethal tools. We have a lot of specialty groups. We have access to mental health services in the city. There's a lot of different things that an officer has in their toolbox to basically figure out what is a better person or thing that can help me have a successful outcome on this call for service. And then the L stands for lines of communication. So for us, lines of communication, we talk to 3 separate entities on any given call for service. So anybody on law enforcement's team. So anybody we may call to a scene, anybody that's on our radio, police officers, other agencies, fire, EMS, we communicate with them. That's one group. That's the law enforcement entity. Second entity is the community. Hey, are people around us, do they understand why we're there? Do we have clear communication? Hey, I need everybody to back up because we're dealing with this situation. We're looking for a dangerous suspect, whatever it is. Also, the third one is the suspect themselves. Are we communicating effectively with the suspect? There's a clear expectation and a clear expectation of what may happen if they do not comply. That communication is also communication that we're having with the community. Obviously, in today's age, we have a lot of people that are on cell phones. Everyone wants to be involved or see what's going on. We have successful outcomes when we're communicating exactly why we're talking to a suspect. Hey, you're wanted in an armed robbery. Do exactly as I say. If you do not do this, we will use a beanbag shotgun. It will force you to comply and it will hurt people that are watching. There's no question as to why we're contacting this person. And other officers arriving on scene know exactly what kind of less lethal tools we're going to be using, to expect it, and then to be able to have a plan to go up and take a suspect into custody. All right, next slide, please. So in January of 2020, we did our test run. The SPI grant allowed us to have this test run, this original curriculum, and we put it in front of some ASU curriculum designers. Our original curriculum, believe it or not, was 20 hours. It was not well received by our folks. Matter of fact, I had an Army Ranger in the class that said that was the worst training he's had since Army Ranger school. And we intentionally put some very hard people in our test group to have an honest response to us. We talked with the ASU curriculum designers. They guided us. They helped us. They put the whole group through another set of training. We were able to parse the training down to 10 hours with a little more scenario based and some other things that we put in there. We put all that group through it again, and everybody was super satisfied with the end product. So starting in February of 2020 through March, we went through all the sessions for half of everybody in the agency, and it was taught by training unit, me, a bunch of our experts, and then a bunch of people that were our top de-escalators. And I'm going to play this video, and I'm going to have the person who's playing it going to play it twice for me. I'm I'm going to play it through, and I just want you to watch it. I'm going to give you a little bit of a warning here. Someone is going to get tased. There is blood in the call. Everybody's fine. And then I'm going to play it again, and I'm going to speak to it how we would expect our sergeants, our supervisors, and our DT instructors, all of our people in the training unit, how to speak about this call, because there's a lot of nuance when we talk about the patrol model as these officers go and handle this situation. So this is at night. The police department is technically closed, at least for our front lobby staff. We've had somebody that's kicked in the front door of the police department. They have a knife and they have blood on them, and you will see what our officers do. I'm going to play it, and then I'm going to have our person bring it back, and then I'm going to talk about the patrol model as it goes down, and you'll see how we get this operational piece across to our people. Go ahead and play it, please.
All right.
There's going to be silence for the first 30 seconds. Well, you'll see the officer turn on their camera here in a second. I'm just going to let it play, and I'll be quiet, and then we'll do it again. This is the best part too, man.
Did the video freeze for
Yes,
everybody?
it did. That's why I'm having a hard time.
All right. Hold on. There we go. Is it playing again now?
Yes, sir.
All right.
We don't have any volume yet, though. Here it goes. All right, we're good.
You want a taser? Okay, who's got lethal?
She has a knife in her right hand.
Yeah, she's holding a knife right now. Okay, I'm just gonna pop her. Yeah. Get down the ground. Drop the knife. Drop the knife. Drop the knife. Complex when taser deploys. Hey, don't move. You're gonna get it again. Do not move. Get down on your stomach. Lay down on your stomach. Hands out to your sides. Do not move.
Okay, you can stop it, sir, and restart it. And I'll tell you when to stop it again. So call for service actually comes in. The officers, when we talk about the patrol model, they're coming up with the plan. They're going to come out here and see what and make an assessment as to exactly what they have. So the call for service is there's someone in the lobby with a knife kicked in the front door. And you'll hear these officers talk about their plan as they approach.
You want a taser?
I'm going to run with the taser. So he's going to be our less lethal option. So that's part of the plan, the assessment. He asks us, the next officer, you're lethal, right? In case the taser doesn't work. We talk about time. He's going to take an opportunity here right now because the time is not as important. Like you can slow down, but she doesn't know that they're there. So he's going to do real quick. Do we have to give command? No, we don't.
Drop the knife. Drop the knife. Drop the
now
knife.
Time changes. Let the video play. We're going to slow down. You're going to watch these officers right now. There's no hurry to rush in, jump on this person. She's covered in blood. There's a knife that's still in play. We do not want to get in a lethal force encounter with this person. You're going to hear clear commands.
Yeah, we're good.
And you're also going to hear an ask for the fire department, I believe. Everybody slows down. They tell each other, hey, glove up. Great lines of communication between the officers. Great lines of communication to the suspect. Clear commands. Don't do what you're going to do. You're going to get tased again. And this person is taken into custody. She's not hurt except for a little knot on her head and what she already had going on. You can pause it then. So I want to talk about real quick before we move on. You see at the bottom, refresher and virtual roll call training. So during the rollout and evaluation phase, every month we have what we call our force review committee. We review every taser, anything above taser in our use of force, and 20% of everything there below that is reportable force in our department. Strikes, takedowns, chemical agents, pepper spray, things like that. We would find a piece of force that was representative of something that where officers used the patrol model. They had a plan, they assessed, they used time correctly, they redeployed as necessary, they looked for other resources, and they communicated well throughout. And we would roll it out to everybody that was involved in the actual training. And it was highly successful. And it also highlights what the department, to everyone involved in the department, determines our, use of force isn't really ever pretty, but successful outcomes in use of force is something that we should strive for. And good decision making using the patrol model is something that we strive for every single time and every single call for service that we go on. Next slide, please. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. White.
All right. Thanks, Commander Sorensen. So I'm going to talk about the evaluation, but what you've heard so far, the first two pieces from Carlena, you heard about the curriculum development. Obviously, this was a whole lot went into the development of this training curriculum. A period of 18 months was devoted to build it essentially, from the ground up. And as you heard from Commander Sorensen, this was much more than just about tactics. Obviously, that was a really strong piece of it, but this was grounded in officer safety. Officer health and wellness was a huge part of the training. So it was much more than, I think, what people generally think about when they think of de-escalation training. So let's talk about the evaluation. I know we're short on time, so I'm going to move through this quickly. I will say that our final report is available on the SPI website, and everything is detailed there. We've published several preliminary articles already, and we were featured by Police One as well just a couple of months ago. So in terms of the evaluation, as I mentioned before, it was a randomized controlled trial at the squad level, about 100 officers per group. So that means that there were squads of officers that were randomly selected to get the training and squads that were selected to not get it. And then the evaluation is a comparison of those two groups of officers, those that got it and those that didn't. And you can see we did a whole range of things to assess whether the training had any impact on officer attitudes and behavior. We did surveys before and after. We looked at the administrative data, so use of force, complaints, injuries. We did interviews with hundreds of citizens who had recent encounters with Tempe police officers, both those that got the training and those that didn't. And I think the most unique piece for the evaluation, we watched, and when I say we, I don't mean me, I mean Carlena and Victor and other graduate students watched hundreds of hours of body cam footage to get a really, really nuanced look at the potential impact of this training. And we did this in two ways. One, and I'll talk about both, was just a kind of a random selection of footage. And but then we also looked at body cam footage of all use of force incidents. And so let's go to the next slide. I'm going to move through these pretty quickly. As I said, Carlena had talked about how we used the survey to help build the curriculum, but we also used the survey after the training to look for differences between those two groups of officers, those that got the training and those that didn't. As you can see from this slide, we did find some differences favoring a training impact, that is, officers self-reporting greater use of certain tactics compared to those that didn't get it. Compromise, maintaining officer safety, knowing when to walk away. And we detailed these findings in the article you see on this slide, and I can send that to you if you like. Just let me know. The next slide. This one I do want to spend a little bit more time on because I think this is a really important set of findings. As I said, we interviewed hundreds of citizens who had encounters with Tempe officers. We interviewed them generally 1 to 3 weeks after their encounter, and we asked them a whole series of questions about the encounter that they had. And the format, you see some of the findings here. Basically, it was asking citizens, indicate your level of agreement with the following statement. The officer treated you fairly. The officer was honest with you. And these were rated on a scale of 0 to 3. You see on the slide mean scores. Higher is better. And again, what we're doing is we're comparing the citizens who had interactions with trained officers to the citizens who had interactions with officers who did not get the training. And the citizens didn't know who was who. We were looking at 28 specific outcomes or aspects of the encounter, and you see some of the significant findings here. There were 16 statistically significant findings favoring a positive training impact. So the officer treated you fairly. citizens were more likely to agree with that statement if they interacted with an officer who got the training. And that follows through. And you can see these are some pretty important outcomes. The first several deal specifically with procedural justice kind of things, but they were also more satisfied with how they were treated. They indicated that the trained officers were more likely to show patience, to actively listen, to compromise, to show empathy. So again, some important differences here. And I think this is important for the project because this didn't come from the officers themselves. It's not administrative from data from the department. These are actual community members in Tempe. Something bad happened. A police officer responded. They had an interaction. And what our findings show is that citizens who had interactions with trained officers had much more positive views of that encounter. Next slide. So let's get to the body camera review. And like I said, we did this in two ways. First was just a random selection of footage. So every week we would randomly select 5 officers, 10 officers, 5 who got the training, and 5 that didn't get the training. Then we go into the evidence.com cloud storage and randomly select a video from each one of those 10 officers, and we watch it. And we had a data collection instrument that captured about 150 different variables or aspects of the training. And then we just simply compared, the encounters among those 2 officer groups. And you can see here from the slide, we have identified some pretty important differences for the trained officers. So, for example, trained officers were much less likely to use a condescending or patronizing tone. They were more likely to try to build rapport, less likely to use charged or imposing body language. And we went into this thinking that the administrative data, the use of force data, the complaint data was going to be way too blunt a measure to capture the nuance of the impact of this training, because Tempe is a very professional department, very low use of force department. And we really thought the body cam footage would be able to capture an impact of the training if there was one. And I think we see here that it did. Next slide. As I said, we also reviewed body cam footage of all use of force incidents, and using that same data collection process, looking before the training and after the training. I won't bore you with all the different results that we found, but I do want to highlight one here that is, I think, really important. And remember, these are use of force encounters only. And when we looked at citizen injury in post-training use of force encounters, and you can see it on here, citizen injuries were 58% less likely to occur if the use of force involved a trained officer compared to one who wasn't trained. So obviously that is a very important finding. Next slide. So like I said, I ripped through that fairly quickly. Check out our final report. I see the link is now in the chat. As we think about lessons learned and what might be beneficial for other departments, one of the first things we had to think about was whether this was lightning in a bottle. Was this something that just happened in Tempe and that wouldn't be useful for anyone else? And we don't think so. The approach that we took with curriculum development, with the comprehensive training, with the evaluation, we think we've kind of laid the roadmap for others to follow if they want to implement a de-escalation training. And then you see here some kind of tips on each major component of the project: the design phase, the customization, working with the peer-nominated top de-escalators, the delivery. I think in particular the refresher trainings that occurred over the months that followed after the initial training that Dane described, I think they were really useful in terms of reinforcing some of the key elements of the training. And again, only the trained officers, the treatment group, if you will, received those refresher trainings. And then the evaluation. Obviously, having one is a good idea, but making it as rigorous as possible, and thinking creatively about how to measure impact. The biggest findings of impact for this study did not involve the traditional administrative data that people look at, use of force complaints. It was citizen surveys. It was the body cam footage. So you got to think creatively about measuring impact, and then you got to kind of dive in and go after it. So I think I think we're well past our time, and Chris, I guess we'll take any questions if we have time for it.
Yeah, thank you, Mike, and thank you, Commander and Carlena, for the presentation. Does anybody have any questions for the site? Nope. Here we have one from one of the Florida State folks. What challenges emerged in this project that you weren't expecting? What do you wish you knew beforehand that might have led you to do something differently?
Well, I'm sure Dane has some ideas on this. I'll mention one major challenge. I don't know if you picked up on the timing. We had epically bad timing. The training, the classroom-based training was rolled out in a series of one-day sessions, the last of which I think was March 2nd, 2020, which is about 10 days before then President Trump declared a national emergency for COVID. So this evaluation, this rollout occurred almost simultaneously with the global pandemic, which complicates things enormously for us. So that was one thing. I'll turn it over to Carlena or Dane to see if they have anything specific they wanted to highlight with regard to that question.
I think the question was, what do you wish you knew beforehand that you might let you do something differently? I don't know how much it would have been done differently because we still had to study, the treatment group versus a control group. But the biggest thing that I found after the fact was you can't just do this training. You have to make it policy. You have to do a deep dive into everything that you write down, every training that you do going forward to make this stick and make it part of promotional processes. We've done all that, and it's been highly successful, and it's the new language of the department, which is super cool. It's become part of our culture.
Great. Any other questions? All right. Well, I just wanted to say a couple words across both of the presentation. In addition to my thanks and SPI's thanks for you all presenting, I also wanted, the new sites to kind of have an understanding of where we wanted these presentations to kind of fit into where you're starting to think about your SPI. I think both of these initiatives have demonstrated some of the challenges that an SPI has, but also reinforced some of the evidence-based practices that are important to an SPI. While one was on sexual assault task force and one was de-escalation, I think the continuous use of evidence and data at each step of the way has really made a difference in their journey and their final outcomes. I think that is one of the principles that really helps a lot of SPI sites along the way, because it allows you the opportunity to kind of make small course adjustments at different key points in time instead of needing to make total course corrections, a year into your project. And I think the research partner, our SPI training and technical assistance team, BJA, are all very in tune with that kind of a model. So as you're working on your SPI and as you're figuring out new things along the way about either operations or the evaluation, just being flexible about what is possible and where you want to go with your SPI is an important feature that you want to keep in mind. Chip, any parting thoughts? Otherwise, we're going to take a quick 5-minute break before we get into our breakouts.
Yeah, let's take a break. I'll have some thoughts at the end of the day, Chris. I
Okay.
thoroughly appreciated those presentations.